So let's talk about the year 1985, more specifically 1985 versus 2025. In 1985, I was 11 years old, so I'm now 51, obviously, it's 40 years ago. And I just remember sitting in 1985 watching old TV shows because in the 80s there seemed to be a big push for all things 60s. Not that they weren't already airing reruns of TV shows, but it seemed like there was a really big 60s kick that a lot of people were on. So, 1985, they were showing all these 60s shows. They were showing Gidget and the Munsters and the Addams Family and the Monkees and F Troop and McHale's Navy and many other older shows. And they were also rerunning these beach blanket movies, like the Annette Funicello and Frankie Avalon movies, the Beach Blanket Bingo, and all those types of beach movies or surfing movies. So I remember sitting in 1985, 11 years old, and really becoming a fan of the show Gidget. But I was thinking, so I would look at it was, the intro would come on, it would say copyright 1965, and I would think to myself, wow, that was 20 years ago. That was, a long time ago. I thought that was a really long time ago. So again, perspective, when you're a kid, you think 20 years is a really long time. It is, but it isn't. When you're a kid, you think it's a really super long time. But now, 40 years from that point, 40 years from 1985, um, Gidget is now 60 years old. And this is the old Gidget TV show that had Sally Field and Don Porter. And there had been some Gidget movies, but this was the TV series, and it didn't last very long. And then after that, Sally Field went on to The Flying Nun. But I was more of a fan of Gidget. Personally, I was more of a Gidget fan than The Flying Nun. So here it is, jump ahead 40 years later, and I'm looking back at Gidget, and it's now been 60 years since that show. But I just remember in the 80s they were trying to bring back all the 60s stuff. They were showing reruns of the Monkees, and they even started a new Monkees group with new members of the group. So they had like the original Monkees with Davy Jones and Peter Tork and all the original Monkees. But then there was this other younger version, like I think they were just calling themselves the New Monkees, and it was kind of strange. And they were going around on, I think they were going around on tour and stuff. So it was just really weird. And I didn't get into the New Monkees. I rather watch the old version of the Monkees, the original Monkees. But again, that was in the 80s. There was this big 60s push. And I believe the Monkees came out in 1966, if I'm not mistaken. And I know for sure Gidget came out in 1965. But again, these shows, 59, 60 years old, it's just amazing how long ago they came on. But when I was a kid, when those shows were 19 and 20 years old, I really thought that was something. I really thought that was old, or that was a long time ago at that time. So it's all about perspective. But of course, in 1985, I would also watch all of the popular shows of the day. I was watching The Facts of Life and Different Strokes, and The Love Boat was still on the air, and there were many other shows. There was Give Me a Break, it was still on the air. Family Ties, Cheers, Night Court. So all of those shows were still, they were on the air back in the 80s. So I was watching whatever was popular back in the day, popular or modern for those times. But I would always go back to or look back at the older shows of the 60s and the 70s also. So it's about perspective. 1985 versus 2025. Being an 11-year-old versus being a 51-year-old and looking back and reminiscing on classic TV shows.